During tonight's program, you're going to hear about the largest private land donation in history from one of the people who helped make that happen. As a good friend of Kris Tompkins, I want to tell you a few things about the kind of person who's capable of such greatness. First of all, Kris is an exceptionally skillful executive, a true leader in the best sense of the word. When she and her late husband, Doug, began their conservation work in Chile and Argentina 25 years ago, she took along with her her instincts and skills she perfected as CEO of the Patagonia Company in Ventura, California. Over the 10 years of my travels to their protected lands, I've watched how Kris holds authority with confidence and kindness, whether facilitating park staff meetings, talking with journalists and filmmakers, or deliberating the fine points of donation documents with cabinet ministers. She's also a leader who rolls up her sleeves and works hard. She expects a lot of herself and everyone who works for her. I don't think there's a single thing Kris wouldn't be willing to do, whether it's fighting grass fires, taking out old fencing, or planning menus in the lodge dining room. I'll never forget the devastation of the 2008 Chai-10 volcano eruption. Kris and Doug were just about to open Pumalin National Park. They went right to work, got busy, remediating and repairing what was covered with ash, and after 2 years, they were open for visitors in the new gateway town of Amarillo. Something else remarkable about Kris are her people skills. She's alert, curious, and ever willing to engage. What you see is what you get. She's the same whether she's with East Coast financiers, Prince Charles, the Pope, or with friends out on a hike. She likes honest, meaningful conversation. She asks tough questions and willingly gives sensible advice. I truly believe it's Kris's exceptional relationship skills that have brought about the greatest achievements of Tompkins conservation. Additionally, I know her to be playful, and that is a big factor in her greatness. She's untamed and quirky, always up for some crazy fun. On 2 different Antarctic expeditions, I've seen pictures of her jumping off the boat to swim among the icebergs. Last year, she took a freighter from Tierra del Fuego to South Africa so she could experience the vast wilderness and solitude of the southern Atlantic Ocean. When you visit her in Chile, you never know what surprises are in store for you. This Christmas, I was there with Dave and his family, Hazel, Gus, and Heidi. About 9:30 at night, after our huge Christmas dinner, while we were still sitting around the table, Kris jumped up and said, "Let's take a hike." Well, fortunately, since we were in the southern hemisphere and it was only days after the summer solstice, we had enough light to do that. So we piled in the vans and bumped along the dirt roads to a high overlook above a deep river valley. We trekked down the steep slope to the dramatic confluence of the sparkling turquoise Bacher and the murky gray Chacabuco rivers. We skipped rocks, told stories, and felt like the luckiest people alive. And that's a Christmas we'll never forget. Our guest tonight is a force for nature. She is a force to be reckoned with, a force for good. Please welcome Kris Tompkins.
Thank you. May I live up to those kind words. Maybe often I don't. Tonight we're under a ticking clock, so I want to go skitter along. I thought I would give you a little background on my husband Doug and I, and then take you on a zooming trip through 3 of the national parks that we've done out of the 13. So put your seatbelts on, and we'll get going start off with a little video that refers to the last donation we've done that Nancy was talking about. I don't know how to make that go. Oh, here. Can you turn the lights down a bit? Thanks. So that just to wake you up before I get going. Okay, Tompkins Conservation, our family foundation, formed by Doug in 1990. I'm going to give you a little background on how we ended up, where we've ended up, and why. So I would say Doug, known to a few of you, John Roskally is here, maybe a few others, was truly a wild man in the way he manifested his life all through his life. We grew up as climbers, we were both ski racers, boaters, and through that we really developed a love for wildness in terms of nature. And of course we were, like I think most of you, born and bred through one of the most interesting political times as far as contemporary history, and that informed our love of fighting and sticking up for things that you believe in. And that in turn was imbued through the companies that we were attached to. Doug was the founder of the North Face, sold that, started a spree with his wife Susie, and Yvonne. I met Yvonne when I was 15, started working with him when I was 19, full-time when I was 21, and stayed. That's the only job I've ever had. So I'm proud to say I think those companies really imbued the ethos that began when we were fairly young. So why did we go to the Southern Cone? A lot of that is attached to the original trip that my husband Doug and Yvonne Chenard and a couple other friends taking a van from San Francisco, driving it straight down to the tip of the Southern Cone and to climb an emblematic peak called Fitzroy, which eventually became the pattern for the label that you see, the ubiquitous label you see every place. And Yvonne and Doug really never forgot that trip to Patagonia. It was wild, it was open, and it was the United States 200 years earlier. And it informed their way of thinking and their way of imagining like nothing else in their lives. So now we roll through our business lives. I'm now 43, Doug is around 50 years old, and he's out. He said, I'm sick of making things that nobody needs. I'm getting out of business, the fashion industry. And in parallel, though I love Patagonia, I'm still involved, I was ready to do something else with my life, but I wasn't quite sure what route that would take. But we met down in a one-dog town in southern Argentina in 1990, and that was it. And we eventually married and started working in Chile, principally in conservation, retiring, going south. Our foundations have been built since the beginning on 5 areas, 5 or 6, conservation of landscape and marine systems. The restoration of landscapes. Rewilding, I'm going to talk a lot about that in a minute, and in this sense I mean rewilding of wildlife. Regenerative agriculture, this is one of our farms in Argentina, which I'm not going to dogleg off to tonight because we'd be here for 4 hours. But we have always felt that in all the conservation work that we do, if you don't get agriculture right, you can kiss the rest goodbye. And so, though we do other things, this is one of the hearts of what we believe. And like a good person out of the 60s and 70s, we believe in activism. As Ed Abbey said, sentiment without action is the ruination of the soul, and we take that very seriously. And finally, healthy, dignified local communities. And from a human standpoint, that sentiment is obvious. From a conservation standpoint, it's essential. You cannot imagine conservation areas protected 100 to 200 years from now if the communities around them don't make them their own, that they benefit from them, that they identify with them, they have that sense of ownership. So, going south. This is taken in 1993, and this is where we were based, in one of the 2 roadless areas between Alaska and the tip of South America. We flew in, or you take a boat down a really whoppingly tough fjord, and that's how we got started. This is now Pumalin Douglas Tompkins National Park. In the ensuing years, we built teams, spreading out into Argentina, and this is what the national parks look like now. This is what we've been doing on the national park side. This is what we've done so far. A couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to get seriously into marine protection, and for those of you who are not so familiar, this is Tierra del Fuego, this is the Beagle Channel, Isla Los Estados, and these are the first large no-take zones in all of Argentina. It's roughly 100,000 square kilometers. That was those. I started with 6. I had the bejesus beaten out of us by the fishing industry, and at long last we ended up with 2 out of the 6. But we're getting started. We're on the scoreboard. So here's just a little run-up on this side, the 13 parks, just under 15 million acres. You're going to hear a lot about the species we've been reintroducing, rewilding, calculating carbon that has been sequestered through the parks and other projects that we have, and the marine parks, as I said, roughly 100,000 square kilometers. Everything we have done on both in terrestrial and marine conservation is shaped around national parks. And a lot of people ask us, especially Chileans, because they feel threatened by their own government, and certainly the Argentines do, why national parks? Why don't you just keep them, throw a lock on the front gate, and call it a day? So I like to think of it like this. It's a democratic idea, finally, and not ours. Here's a Picasso. She's gorgeous. You hang her in her room, in your living room, and your friends and family get to see her, but that's about it. You take the same Picasso, you hang her in the Met, and millions of people enjoy her and study her and wonder what she's thinking about every year. So this is how we feel about land. People will only fall in love with the places they can access. We want people out in these high peaks around Pumalane. We want jaguars coming back and tormenting their mother. We want people to be in northern Argentina eventually and see jaguar populations back, healthy and protected. Because that's how we connect with all life. We value it. So, here's the first of the parks I thought I would show you as an example. Pumalane, of course, this is the view out of the house that we were in during our years based there. That's the Michimahuida volcano. This was finally, I turned this park over on April 30th of this year, 1 month ago. It's 1 million acres, just over. So this was a tough go. This is where we cut our teeth on politics in Chile. We were known as the couple who cut Chile in half. People thought we were establishing a new Jewish state, even though we were raised as Anglicans. That we would take out all the cattle in the southern part of Chile and put in American bison. And so it went. We were, our phones were tapped, military planes flying over our roofs. It was a very rough start. But that seems so far in the past now that it's not much of the story. So this park goes from the top of the Andes on the border of Argentina, goes down through roughly 800,000 acres of pristine Valdivian temperate rainforest, down into the Pacific Ocean, straight down into these deep, pristine fjords with marine life edged all the way around. We had as Nancy pointed out, we had our own volcano, which Doug was mortified by. I thought it was fabulous. I mean, geologic time in your backyard. It cost us millions of dollars in a few years to get back to zero once it blew its top. It was not that big, but it created havoc. All the volcanoes in Chile, of which you know there are many, that with the prevailing westerly wind, all the ash goes into Argentina, so it makes it relatively easy for Chile, and Argentina is the one that gets the hardest go. These are alerce trees. These are the first cousin to giant sequoias, which you find here in North America. And I bring this up because, like the sequoias here, there aren't so many of them left. This park has roughly 25% of the remaining stands. This one is estimated to be nearly 3,000 years old, the one on the right. And then hundreds, if not thousands, of waterfalls throughout this beautiful park. And just beauty, untouched, impossible to reach 98% of it because it's truly an impenetrable rainforest. And this is the kind of stylistic infrastructure as we go. This is housing for park guards, hanging bridges in to see the alerces, lots of trails, restaurant, little tiny cabañas, information center, and so on. So it's all there. So that's Pumalane. Remember, temperate rainforest, because now I'm pulling you 600 miles to the south. The rainforest dissipates as you get out into the higher latitudes, and you come to one of the great emblematic parks, which Nancy has been so key in. This also was turned over to the government on April 30th. So we're out Actually, we are officially parkless currently, after 25 years. Everything's gone. This is 764,000 acres of Patagonia steppe grasslands. You can see it's down there on the border. Again, another border property that goes from Argentina all the way out to the west, not quite to the coast, but nearly. This is rock and ice. This is the western border is formed by the Bacher River, which is the largest river in the country.
No.
So, absolutely exquisite beat up grasslands. When you look at pictures like this, well, not this, this is two beat up women. This is Nancy and me. And I just, she's not going to like this, and my beloved dog Guacho. Nancy has her fingerprints all over this park and other things that we do. But I cannot understate the partnership and the stuff she's done for this park, making up menus, her fingerprints are everywhere. Her heart is everywhere in this park. So this is one of the areas that she funded and also comes down to check on. And that is a partnership. Goes long before, anyway, I don't know, I get teary thinking about it. So that's us. There's the Bacher River. These grasslands, over 1 century, have been largely decimated by the English bringing sheep into the entire southern Patagonia region, throwing millions of sheep on it, and then mismanaging the whole thing. We bought the first 300,000 acres of this by Chacabuco. It's beautiful, but the grass system was right on the edge of desertification, and once it hits that, there's no going back. So I'm very happy to see what's taken place here. This is what it's starting to look like. There's a big difference. When we bought it with 25,000 sheep on the estancia. Not by choice, but it was a very tough buy, and we just had to close the deal and take it. But it was lambing season, so 6 weeks later we had 50,000 sheep. So suddenly I was in the sheep business again. Anyway, this park goes all the way to the Argentine border, as I mentioned. Goes up over the border and goes into Argentina here, where we're working on Patagonia National Park, Argentina, which is going to be in the area of 1.2 million acres. So that's kind of one of our Chapter 2 projects that's been going actually for a while. So these are big landscapes. They're beautiful, and they deserve to be restored. So I'm just going to take you through some of the locals. This is a vizcacha. I love these things. And their numbers were extremely low when we got started. They're very shy. They hide in the rocks, and they're coming back. And of course, the caracaras, just a few shots, the emblematic Andean condor, with whom we work, trying to bring their numbers back up, and beloved pumas. This has become a big part of our work. It's not that they weren't there, it's that for the last 100 years there's been a systematic persecution of all predators. Think of the wolves here and so on. It's the same situation. So when we bought the first property in 2004, one of the first things we did is say, knock that off. We're not going to do that anymore. Stand a really fully functioning ecosystem. Over 400 species of birds, a few of which I'll show. The marsh deer, very few of them. Today there are thousands of them. And carpinchos, or they're called capybaras, world's largest rodent. I don't think they like that title though, so we just call them by their name. They're everywhere. Howler monkeys, just to show you some of the fauna and flora of this extraordinary landscape. But about 5 years, maybe 8 years into buying land and mapping and trying to get the province to even remember that they owned all of this land, or that all this was part of their territory. This was the forgotten corner of northeastern Argentina. And it was a great time, looking backwards, to join in. So who's missing? We began to think. There are a lot of things missing. So we committed ourselves to rewilding. And that is, in this part of our story, where we began to think of rewilding as the whole system. The national parks, that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of trying to thwart the extinction crisis. In the corners that we can, we're small. So it changed our thinking utterly, that national parks were just a strategy, a vehicle to find the space for extirpated species to come back in. Giant anteater, we thought, how hard could it be? They're quiet, their mouth is an inch wide, no trouble. Well, that's not true. You'll see some babies, hand raised. But today we have 2 fully functioning, several generations of babies born in the wild, and a 3rd one, I would say, sort of 70% to being completed, and the final 4th not yet begun. They're everywhere, and their collars are coming off, and they are really back. Okay, I'm going to try to read this. I don't think I can read it. 70 years after its extinction, the jaguar in the province of Corrientes, Tompkins Conservation is working to bring the jaguar and other species back. These have been missing for 150 years, the macaws. Gives you a little idea of a few of the species that we're working on in parallel, all of them simultaneously with an extraordinary, I almost said collection, team of biologists and veterinarians and strategists, and we work with people from around the world who come in. This is the largest single reintroduction program in the world. And with all its successes and failures, we nudge things ahead. And it has informed the work we do wherever we are, in the South, in the Patagonian regions, in other areas in the North. We are not finished now until the question of who's missing goes answered. So this is what baby tapirs look like. Adorable. This is an Ibera, maned wolf, rare, but coming back. We have had a few opportunities to bring individuals in, but by and large, this species is coming back. Peccaries, I know most people think, oh, they're pigs. But they are an important part of the system, and they're very easy to reintroduce. You get them, a dozen of them, they go into the quarantine, of course, but when they're ready, you just let them go. And they have their own families created, and they reproduce nicely, so given a lack of threat and territory, they do very well. These are the red-shouldered macaws, as I tried to say while the little film was going. They've been gone for around 150 years. And this project was probably the longest shot we ever took. And when we began, we had 4 individuals. They come to us, they cannot fly, they have no muscle structure, they have been in a cage, they don't know what to eat, they don't know how to speak to one another. And we lost all 4 of the individuals we worked with. And it was my opinion, we just get out. We took such a licking on that one. And the head of rewilding said, no, we have to do this. This is possible. And today, as you saw in the little film, we have many flying. They're trying to breed. They're trying to learn to make nests. That may take a while. But they're eating well. They're thriving. So, and we had a donation by a group of wealthy conservationists in London to fly over 20 more. So each one, you teach them how to fly, you teach them every skill they need. And it is a long process, but they're back. They're back and in business. Here's a baby anteater, just to show you that each individual, at least the ones who arrive to us, and the majority of them orphans, of course, they require hand care until about 10 months before they're finally released. They're on your shirt, they're in your shirt, you don't want to be put down, and that's love. This is, we're bringing back another species of deer, the pampas deer, which is extinct from this territory, but not extinct from the country. And each one requires helicopter flights on a plane, vets, biologists, corrals, all sorts of things. And here is, today we have 2 healthy populations. So here are just a few pictures of what it takes to work with. When you commit yourself to rewilding, you really have no idea what you're going to get involved in. And just to show you some of the days that we have with these magnificent creatures. Anyway, once any species is out and been released, they are tracked with collars. We need to know that they're doing well, and eventually the collars either fall off as planned, or we recapture them and take them off, and then they're on their way. So chapter 2, which I think is kind of a false title, donated a month ago. What are we doing? And I will say that it's not enough to create these parks. You have to create the social and cultural platforms for, in this case, Chile, that the citizenry of Chile takes them, falls in love with them, and supports them. So we have Amigos de los Parques in Chile now, which is getting kids into the parks and so on. Ruta de los Parques, I'm going to show you this really quickly because this is changing the story greatly in terms of how people are imagining parks.
Route of Parks of Chile and Patagonia, 17 national parks. than 1,700 miles of scenic beauty, shelter for species in danger of extinction, and home to more than 60 communities, rich in culture and tradition. The route of parks of Chile and Patagonia spans a third of Chile, integrating 3 regions from Puerto Montt to Cape Horn, the Lake District, Aysén, and Magallanes. Uniting the Carretera Austral, the Patagonian channels, and the routes to the end of the world. Protecting more than 28.4 million acres of national parkland. The route of parks of Chile and Patagonia represents an opportunity for local economic development based on tourism as a consequence of conservation. The most beautiful scenic route in the world already exists, and it is in Chile. Travel it, discover it, protect it. Route of Parks of Patagonia. Protected heritage of all Chileans.
So that's our commitment to I hate this word, but reimagine southern Chile so that the towns are connected, and the towns are connected to the parks, and that's connected to all Chileans and people who come from outside of Chile, that there is a goodness in connectivity. You talked a lot about that earlier. So where we work, we're leaving behind structures that governments pick up and carry forth to try to support these parks as we go on our way. So I end with this. Everybody asks, why would we do this? We could be floating on a yacht in the Aegean Sea, which is not a bad idea. But if you go back to the first few slides from half an hour ago, we have a wild mind, and we love wild nature, and really truly believe that the non-human world has intrinsic value all its own. All life has intrinsic value. I had the chance I was invited to go visit with Pope Francis last June on my birthday, sitting in his library, just us. And I was so nervous, I thought, well, the best thing to do is just start talking. So I immediately started to tell him how I desperately want to change the concept of peace. From the Nobel Prize, one human to another, creating a momentary peace. And I want to change it to humans in peace with a non-human world, because the dignified communities we all want and Pope Francis seeks, and all the other things are based from that foundation of a healthy ecosystem. And without that, we can't find what is actual peace. Anyway, so I don't know why I got off on that. I'm looking at a tiny puma. But these are the reasons. Fatso there. We've done a lot for him since he was born. Their birthday is coming up in another week. They'll be a year old. And of course, human future generations. And of course, for my husband Doug, whom we lost more than 3 years ago now, who really was the guy who thought that nothing was impossible, that all you had to do is imagine it and then start in. So, I guess, as I say here, this is what it means to love something. Thank you very much.